Last Sunday, the Prime Minister outlined the steps which will be taken in due course to bring us out of lockdown. Much has been written and said about what he meant, when it will happen, how we will know that the time is right to move on. 2,000 years ago, the Roman philosopher Seneca wrote on the shortness of life, and in it he writes these words: "The greatest obstacle to living is expectancy, which hangs upon tomorrow and loses today. The whole future lies in uncertainty. Live immediately." There is much debate about whether the responses to the current pandemic of governments, scientists, faith leaders and the press have been wise or well judged. Insofar as this relates to the Church, the question itself raises wider questions. There are those who would criticise the Church for being too liberal, too willing to move with the times, abandoning the time-honoured and cherished patterns of yesteryear in favour of all that is new and where anything goes. And on the other side, there are those who would say that the Church is speaking a language which the world no longer understands, marginal, archaic, entrenched and impervious to change. Well, there is truth in both of those points of view, of course, but the real questions lie elsewhere. For such questions as these fail to address the startling truth that despite everything, the Church has survived, and not just for 2 or 3 generations, but for 2,000 years. The fact is that people will still come to church for hatching, matching, dispatching, and in recent weeks, vast numbers of people have engaged with the Church's online presence. At pivotal points in life, people still come in search of the divine. People still long to visit the holy places, the cathedrals, the shrines, the churches and sites of pilgrimage. They come to stand in sacred space, to wonder and to gain glimpses of another world. And Seneca's question confronts the Church and the world today. When shall we live, if not now? It's not whether the Church is too traditional or too modern. It's nothing to do with any agenda or programme. Rather, it's about the Church being a place where people can learn and begin to understand what it means to be fully alive. Jesus said, "I have come that you might have life." It's the heart of the good news of Easter. So when shall we live, if not now? So many of us, for so much of the time, prepare for a life in the future that never actually materialises. We look forward so much that we never actually get round to living. And this is the theme of today's Gospel. Jesus, speaking of the resurrection, says, "Because I live, you also will live." As we live through these days of Easter, the resurrection appearances of Christ that move towards the Ascension and then to the gift of the Holy Spirit at Pentecost, today's Gospel is part of Christ saying farewell to his disciples. He is explaining what will happen next. He is reassuring them that all will be well. "I will not leave you orphaned," he said. "I am coming to you. In a little while, the world will no longer see me, but you will see me. Because I live, you also will live." And this is when all that Christ has been saying becomes universal, true for all who will put their trust in him. For the disciples will no longer see him physically, but they will see him in his glorified and exalted state. in a vision that surpasses physical sight. In breaking down the barriers of death, Christ assures us of his presence with us, wherever we are and forever. The constraints of time have gone, and the resurrection life goes on forever. So, through the events of Easter, we break out of any understanding of our faith that is stuck in time. It is an historical faith, but the risen Christ comes to us here and now. It is an extraordinary claim, but one that gives substance to our faith and our experience, and which meets the challenge of Seneca: when shall we live, if not now? It's not at all difficult to live in the past, nor even in the future. We can easily wrap ourselves in a nostalgia for the way things were, when seemingly life was much simpler, or we can be forever looking forward to a future that never comes, hankering after life but never actually living it. The substance of the Christian faith is in the here and now, not in as it was in the beginning, is now and ever shall be, not pie in the sky when you die, but now. The risen life is to be lived here in the present day. And maybe that will require us to let go of the things we hold on to let go of the things that hold us back. And each of us must discover what are those things of which we need to be from which we need to be released. And only when we do that will we live. Because Jesus has promised, as he promised to those first disciples, he promises to us, because I live, you also will live.